It's interesting because Volodymyr Zelensky has been really lionized, particularly in the U.S. and Western European media, and it's almost a sort of he's become a kind of caricature with these grand, sweeping historical comparisons, and often the quotes from him are intended to give the appearance of this defiant leader who is going to fight to the end. But when you read between the lines and you read what Ukrainian negotiators are saying, when you read what Zelensky says when pressed on conditions for peace, he seems to be extremely aware of the factors that you're citing, that this has to end in a negotiation. And I want to ask you about the role of the US and European media in sort of perpetuating this mythology around Zelensky and the way in which it seems to kind of undermine the seriousness of the negotiators of Ukraine or of Zelensky when he is talking in a nuanced manner. It seems that there's this intent to kind of create a caricature rather than actually listening to the conditions that Ukraine is stating it can live with.
Yes, you're absolutely right. If you look at the media coverage, Zelensky's very clear, explicit, serious statements about what could be a political settlement, crucially, neutralization of Ukraine. So, yes, of course, he's made it pretty clear that he cares about whether Ukraine survives, whether Ukrainians survive, and has therefore put forth a series of reasonable proposals that could well be a basis for negotiation. We should bear in mind that the nature of a political settlement, the general nature of it, has been pretty clear on all sides for quite some time. In fact, if the US had been willing to consider them, there might not have been an invasion at all. Before the invasion, the US basically had two choices. One was to pursue its official stance, which I just reviewed, which makes negotiations impossible and may have led to war. The other possibility was to pursue the options that were available. To an extent, they're still somewhat available, attenuated by the war, but the basic terms are pretty clear. Sergei Lavrov, Russian foreign minister, announced at the beginning of the invasion that Russia had two main goals, neutralization of Ukraine and demilitarization. Demilitarization doesn't mean getting rid of all your arms. It means getting rid of heavy weapons connected to the interaction with NATO aimed at Russia. What his terms meant basically were turn Ukraine into something like Mexico. So Mexico is a sovereign state, can choose its own way in the world, no limitations, but it can't join a Chinese-run military alliance, emplacing advanced weapons, Chinese weapons, on the US border, carrying out joint military operations with the People's Liberation Army, getting training in advanced weapons from Chinese instructors and so on. In fact, that's so inconceivable that nobody even dares to talk about it. I mean, if any hint of anything like that happened, we know what the next step would be. No need to talk about it. So it's just inconceivable. And well, that was an option that could have been pursued. Instead, the US preferred to do what I just described as inconceivable for Mexico. Now, that's not the whole story. There are other issues. One issue is Crimea. Fact of the matter is, Crimea is off the table. We may not like it. Crimeans apparently do like it, but the US says we're never going to concede it. Well, that's a basis for permanent conflict. Zelensky has sensibly said, let's put that off for further discussion. That makes sense. Another issue is the Donbas region. That's been a region of extreme violence for 8 years, both sides. Ukrainian shelling, Russian shelling, landmines all over the place, lots of violence. There are OSCE observers, European observers on the ground who give regular reports. You can read them, they're public. They don't try to assess the source of the violence. That's not their mission, but they talk about its radical increase. According to them, I think, if my memory is correct, about 15,000 people or something in that neighborhood may have been killed in the conflict over the last 8 years since the Maidan uprising. Well, something has to be done about Donbas. The proper reaction, which maybe the Russians would accept, would be a referendum, an internationally supervised referendum to see what the people of the region want. One possibility, which was available before the invasion, was implementation of the Minsk II agreements, which provided for some form of autonomy in the region within a broader Ukrainian federation, something like maybe Switzerland or Belgium or other places where there are federal structures, conflict, but confined within federal structures. That would have been a possibility. Whether it could have worked, there's only one way to find out: to try. US refused to try, instead insisted on a super militant position, official position, which, as far as I know, the press has yet to report. You can tell me if I'm wrong, but I have never seen one reference anywhere in the mainstream press, so occasionally way at the margins, any reference to the official US position of September 1st, 2021, the reiteration and expansion of it in November in the charter. Actually, I saw one reference to it in the American Conservative Journal, which did refer to it. And of course, on the left, people have talked about it. But the US insisted on that position, which the alternative would have been to pursue the option of saying, okay, your main goals are neutralization and demilitarization, meaning Mexico-style arrangement. Let's pursue that. With regard to Crimea, let's accept Zelensky's sensible position that let's delay it. We can't deal with it now. With regard to the Donbas region, work towards some kind of framework with autonomy based on the opinions of the people who live there, which can be determined by an internationally supervised referendum. Would the Russians agree? We don't know. Would the United States agree? We don't know. All we know is they're rejecting it officially. Could they be pressed to accept it? Don't know. We can try. That's the one thing we can hope to do. The most elementary point of view, the major question is, what can we do about it? And we can, in principle at least, do a lot about US policy, less about other things. So I think that's where the focus of our attention and energy should be.